Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday night Dynasty Heat Seekers live stream. I'm your host, Bryce Frazier, and I'm joined by the always reliable Anthony Leone. Leone, how are we doing today?
Doing great. Good to be here. Glad to see you. Happy to get into this. I have a lot of contending teams, and so a lot of these guys are trade targets of mine myself. So yeah, I'm happy to get into this. How you doing today?
Pretty good. I'm kind of in the opposite boat. A lot of my teams are guys I'm getting rid of these because just didn't some of the stuff didn't pan out. Another league I already kind of traded for some contending assets, so I'm not too worried about it. But yeah, I'm excited to get into it as well. And before we get into it, I want to say anybody who's just joining us and is in the chat, we will answer all questions at the end of the stream. So just stay tuned. We talk about these guys for like 30, 40 minutes, and then we take the last 20 minutes or so and answer any and all questions that are in the chat. So feel free to ask them, and we will answer them in order, so you don't have to ask twice or anything like that. So let's just go ahead and get started. So was it last week that we talked about guys that we were like trading or what was it? We were trading for younger assets, right? Like guys were looking to acquire.
Yeah.
Was that last week? Okay.
Like younger guys and
younger guys that weren't maybe performing well that we were looking to maybe turn it around this upcoming, maybe the next season or the season after, stuff like that. So we're kind of going the opposite direction by, all right, now you started off really well. Your team's like 3-1, 4-0, and then there's some 2-2 teams that still are competitors out there, right? Who are some guys that we should be looking at that could bolster our roster, make our starting lineup better week to week, and really put us in that over that hump and make us the team to beat, maybe in our leagues, or at least make our team, give our team a fighting chance for the teams that are the teams to beat. So let's just jump right into it. So we'll go quarterback first. Leone, I'll start with you. What quarterback are you going into if you have a contending roster?
Yeah, I mean, if you're contending, I mean, the first thing you want to do is just look at the teams that are 0-4, 1-3, that just don't really have a roster that's really put together. And, you may find some guys that we talk about on their roster that's just kind of hanging there, and maybe they're not doing the due diligence, making these trades, and they just kind of get maybe lazy and leave some of these guys on their roster. At quarterback, for me, it's pretty easy. It's Tom Brady. I mean, dude is 45 years old, and he hasn't even started the year strong, which is actually pretty good if you're going to try to acquire him now. It's not like he's kind of blowing the doors off of things. He's had a slow start to the year, but really it's not really because of him or injury. It's just he hasn't really had the weapons to throw the ball to. Evans missed a game, was suspended. Godwin was hurt. Even Russell Gage and Julio Jones, weren't in the mix either. So, I mean, now with these assets for him coming back, we saw Godwin play, had a lot of targets last week. Evans is back. Julio Jones, I guess is going to be healthier and maybe he'll contribute as well. I just think if you can get Tom Brady, yeah, you may not have him next year. He may not play the following season. But if you're contending right now, given his slow start to the year especially, I just think he's an easy buy if you need a second or third quarterback in a super flex league. Or even if it's a one quarterback league, maybe you have Tua, you thought you were good. Now there's a lot of uncertainty there. Or maybe you felt comfortable with Russell Wilson. I think you can get Brady relatively cheap. And if you're making that push to win it this year, I think that's a slam dunk type option. Or maybe you even have Deshaun Watson and you just need someone to get you to the end of the season. I think Tom Brady would be a great buy in that sense. Bryce, I know you were once a Tom Brady supporter when he was on the Patriots.
I'm still a Tom Brady supporter.
Are you still a Tom Brady supporter? What do you think about buying Tom Brady now if you're a contending team looking to get some quarterback help?
First of all, you're not going to find any Patriot fan that dislikes Tom Brady. It's just not going to happen. They're going to support him until the day he's done playing. But yeah, he's the easiest for me, right? We just saw what he did Sunday night when he has all his weapons. Like, he went nuts statistically. Mike Evans went crazy. Chris Godwin had a decent game. Leonard Fournette had a very good game. So when he has all these options, the team is completely different. Like this is a team sport. Like football's a team sport. No one man's going to be doing it by themselves. Players have got to step up. And when you lose guys like Godwin and Evans, you'd expect that slow start that we did see. Yeah, I mean, Superflex League, if there's not very many quarterbacks ahead of him that I could imagine you feel comfortable starting every week, like when you have two of them, that Tom Brady's going to be an improvement in your lineup unless for some reason you're just stacked there with like Allen and Lamar or something like that, right? So if the way I look at a lot of times when I'm trading and I'm a contender is, does this player that I'm trading for make an immediate impact in my roster? Like, I'm not looking for guys to fill in for the bye weeks. I want a guy that's going to start most weeks if I'm going to pay for him. And does it make sense? Like, if I've got Lamar and Josh Allen, makes no sense to go trade for Brady. So let's set the precedence for all these guys that we're going to talk about. If these guys don't improve your starting lineup, don't buy them. Like, right. We're not telling you to go buy these guys to go sit on your bench. If these guys that we talk about are going to be improvements in your lineup and your weekly starting lineup, then that's when you need to go pay for them, because they're probably going to be cheaper options than a lot of these other like studs, right? So like, say you're a contending roster and you just lost Javonte Williams. Listen to some of these running backs that we're going to talk about, and then plug them, buy them and then plug them in there. But yeah, Tom Brady, slam dunk. In a 1 QB league, I'd imagine you could get him dirt cheap, right? I mean, this is most likely as last year if you follow his personal life. There's rumors that he and Giselle both just hired divorce lawyers. So this could be his last season, because I couldn't imagine that he's able to focus too much if he's going to go through something so polarizing in his life. So yeah, Tom Brady's a smash for me. And I also chose a guy that's had a rough start this season, Matt Stafford. Obviously, he had great numbers last year. We're only seeing production out of Cooper Kupp in this offense, realistically, right? Tyler Higby, who I guess we'll talk about later. But everybody else is not doing very well. Like the starting running back, whether it's Darrell Henderson, which this past week it was Cam Akers finally, but went against a stout Niners defense. Like Matt Stafford is struggling, and it's not all his fault. The offensive line is not doing well whatsoever. He looks pressured very quickly on most plays. I would imagine Sean McVay, Matt Stafford, and these veteran guys that just come off a Super Bowl win, they're going to put it together eventually. So if this is the time to buy Matt Stafford. I'm probably not looking at him too much in a 1 quarterback league, because if you're a contender, you probably already have a better option. But in a super flex league where maybe your second option isn't a guy that's you're too comfortable with every week, like say it's like a guy like Daniel Jones or just some middle of the pack. Ryan Tannehill, yeah, good example. It's guys like that are in your lineup, and you're like, I'm okay starting him, but it's not like I feel good about it. I'd feel much better about Matt Stafford, even though he has not produced as well as those guys I just mentioned yet. The season is long. That team's going to put it. I'm very comfortable that team will start to put things together here soon. So what are your thoughts on Matt Stafford?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm a little concerned with how long is it going to take for them to put it back together. Obviously they're missing another wide receiver threat. Van Jefferson's on IR. Allen Robinson looks done. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are on Robinson, but to me, he looks done. I mean, he doesn't look like you can ever start him again in a fantasy roster and really feel good about it. And so teams, I mean, you saw the Niners. I mean, they did their best to cover Cooper Kupp, as best they could. They pressured.
He had 19 targets. You'd expect production from anybody.
Yeah, and they got pressure on Stafford. They did a good job against the run game. I mean, San Francisco is probably one of, if not the best defenses in the league. So I don't want to take one game and focus in on how bad Stafford did and be unfair to him. So, I mean, I think if you can get him for the right price, I'm good with it. I'm just a little concerned that it's going to take a little bit longer than you would like to get him where you need him to be. But I don't hate the pick. I just don't know if, I'd rather pay less for Brady than.
Oh, I would too.
You know what I mean?
Brady Brady is my number one choice, but obviously you had him before me. Like that.
Yeah.
I think that's just a no-brainer one when we're talking about this.
Yeah.
But
I
would you pay a little bit? Like I would imagine you have to pay a little bit more for like a guy like Aaron Rodgers.
I don't think so. I would think Rodgers would be cheaper than Stafford. I would think so.
I would think Rodgers would be a little more because I think I mean even though it wouldn't surprise me if he retired next year. I don't think he does. Like I think he plays another year for sure. So I think you're at least getting 2 years of a guy that's going to start for your team. So I don't know. I think that Rodgers, in my opinion, I think Rodgers would be a little bit more, but they might be around the same price. You might be right, and I'd rather have Rodgers if they were the same price. But I just was assuming that Rodgers would be a little bit more expensive.
Yeah, and if you can get Stafford for the right price, I mean, really any top 20 quarterback can do the job for you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and we're not going to list all these guys, but like I mean, if you need a quarterback, really what you need to do is just find a team that's not contending, look for an older quarterback, and try to get them. I mean, even Matt Ryan and Tannehill and Jameis Winston, I mean, a lot of these guys kind of fit the bill. So as long as you can find the right team and get the right price, I mean that's really what it comes down to. So I like Stafford. The only thing I'm concerned about is how long is it going to take for them to get it all together. That's the only concern I have.
Yeah, I understand. I really think the way that team is playing right now, OBJ coming back to LA is becoming more and more likely in the next few weeks.
Yeah, but the only thing I'm really concerned with OBJ is, coming off a major knee injury. I mean, we don't know exactly how he's going to look either. I mean, would you really be that surprised if he looks like he's lost a step or two? I mean, look at Allen Robinson now.
He might have lost a step. He might lose a step, but OBJ losing a little step. I mean, what he was doing last year was more than enough. So he could. Yeah. It's like I think he could almost afford it a little bit, right? Because I mean, defense has got to focus on Cooper Kupp. Like,
yeah,
OBJ went on the Rams, and he looked like that he could have went on any roster and been an immediate impact for anybody. Like that's just how he looked. He didn't look slow. His route running looked good. He was catching everything that touched his hands. It seemed like. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I think he's got the right doctors and surgeons, and in LA, he's got the right people that I think he would be. I think he'd step back in there and be 90% of what he was, realistically.
Well, you've already foreshadowed our next guy. Why don't you just dive into your running back here?
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about Javonte Williams. So my first one, and he's probably a huge target for a lot of people, is Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon now comes in, I would imagine, as long as he doesn't fumble the ball, comes in as the bell cow back for the Broncos. He's already fumbled the ball 4 times this season, which is concerning because in that game, if you watched it, he fumbled it early and they returned it for a touchdown, and he didn't see another touch until Javonte Williams got hurt. So, yeah, that's a little bit concerning. And Mike and Boone, is it Mike Boone?
Yes,
Boone came in there and he looked pretty efficient on his limited touches as well. But I would imagine they go with the guy that's more comfortable in the system. Melvin Gordon is a good pass catching back. He blocks well. He still runs well for his age. I would imagine he has way more value than he does now with Javonte in there. I think he takes 70 to 80% of the touches. And I think you could buy him relatively cheap. Like, would you, if you had a contending roster, so you think your pick has got to be like 7 through 12, would you spend a second round pick on Melvin Gordon?
Yeah, I would.
I think I would contending. Too. And I think if I owned Melvin Gordon and I wasn't contending, that I would take that. I think I would. Like, I would have no purpose of keeping him on my roster. Like, I realistically don't think his value can go up from there. Like, you're not going to pay – nobody's going to pay a first for him. Like, he would have to just start lighting it up, and I just don't think that's real.
Yeah, and if you wait to the end of the year, I mean, who knows what situation he'll be in next year? I mean, it could easily fall out, from underneath you, and then you'll get nothing in return. So if you're not contending anyway,
a fourth at that point. So
sure,
I think right now is the time to sell him. I think he's a great buy-sell guy. Like, I think you're going to see him in a lot of deals in your leagues. I think he's just a huge buy-sell guy. Easy sell for people that aren't contending. Pretty easy buy and ones that are. I had a league literally today where I saw Melvin Gordon in a trade. So it was a fair trade. So you agree with Melvin Gordon, I'm assuming?
Yep. Yeah, I think that's a good shout.
Yeah. All right, go ahead and go to your first guy.
Oh, well, my first guy is Alvin Kamara. Now, I think the best way to buy a player is to have a good pitch. So when you reach out to the Alvin Kamara owner, if they're not contending, you say, look, Alvin Kamara had a terrible start to the year. You're 0-4. You're 1-3. It looks like things aren't really driving. There's no point in keeping Kamara on your team. And they'll say
suspended next year. Might get suspended next year.
Yeah, I mean you gotta bring all this to the table. Kamara could be. Who knows how many games he'll miss next year? It's like if you're not contending now with Kamara, you can't really hold him till next year because then if he's suspended, 4, 5, 6 games, then you're going to be in the same boat next year. I mean, then you're not going to be able to use him 2 years from now. So, I mean, he's 27 now. Why you can't hold him until he's 29? So that's the argument. And if you're contending and you need a running back, yeah, he started the year slow. He's hurt. We get it. But it's not like his leg is bad, and he has a rib injury. He'll heal. I still think he can end the season very strong, and I expect him to end the year, top 15. And if there's a team that is contending that needs a running back or even needs a third running back, I think Kamara is a great get. I really do. I think you can get him relatively inexpensive, especially when you compare his value a year ago. So, again, he's only 27. Maybe you get lucky and he only gets suspended a couple games. Maybe he doesn't get suspended at all, and then you can have him for a full season when he's only 28. That, ideally, that's great. But if you're contending this year and need a running back, I think Kamara is the way to go. Bryce.
I agree. Let me ask you this. What would you be willing to pay for Alvin Kamara as a contender?
I think a first is fair. I mean, I think if you're contending, it's going to be a late first.
Mm-hmm.
I think a first is fair.
You're not going to buy him any cheaper, right? Like,
I would prefer to do a player like in a second. It depends. What I always explain this on these streams, but I always say to the guy, hey, look, who do you like on my team? Who do you like? Because sometimes they say, oh, I like so-and-so. And you go, oh, really? Like, I wouldn't have thought you would have said him. I don't even really like him that much. Okay, I'll give you him in a second for Kamara. And they go, oh, okay, cool. It happens all the time. So start the conversation. But, yeah, I think a late first for Kamara straight up is fair.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we talked about it. I traded Kamara away for Pacheco and a first. And I was pretty happy with it. Yeah, I think this is a good one as well. Like, Kamara's kind of following that prototypical, like, running back career path when it comes to fantasy, right? Like, he doesn't start off like super hot. He hits like the first couple of years in the league, and he's at his peak, right? He's in his mid 20s, like 23 to 26. He's really top level, and now he's starting to regress, right? So he's kind of like that bell curve, like, I guess is what I'll call it. And I think the best years are definitely behind him. So if I have him, I'm definitely willing to sell him for a first and like a throw-in player like I did, or a player you really like in a second. Because I think his value at this point on is going to decrease. But even as a contender, like, I think his value is still good enough to where I will still pay that first. So I think it's an easy guy to get in trades or trade away. Like, you don't really feel too much of an attachment to him. So I really like giving away Kamara. I really think that he definitely comes back from his injury. The run game looks good for the Saints. So if he can come back and step back in there, and he's much better than Mark Ingram and really still take it to the next level like he has done in the past, like, his numbers are going to improve this season. And you want to try and trade for him before he starts kind of going nuts like he used to, because then people might demand more. With that being said, I'll go into my next guy, another older guy, and he's had a slow start to this year, but the volume is there, and it's James Conner. So James Conner is consistently getting like 15 plus touches a week. He's involved in the pass game. It's not like Christian McCaffrey involved, or Leonard Fournette involved, but he's involved. He gets a nice 3 to 5 catches a week, gets you a nice floor play. He was super dependent on touchdowns last year. So, like, if you look at his stats from last year, they're nothing crazy, but he had a lot of touchdowns, kind of like Damian Harris. So that's where his value came. Well, Arizona's not playing too well. DeAndre Hopkins comes back in 2 weeks. When DeAndre Hopkins comes back, Arizona is going to start scoring more. They're going to get in the red zone more. James Conner's going to get touches in the red zone more. He's going to get more touchdowns once DeAndre Hopkins comes back. I'm very confident in that. The guy, it seems like they somewhat were trying to get some of the backup running backs involved in that offense, and they're just not really doing anything either. So it doesn't seem like it's a running back problem. It just seems like more of an offense problem at this point. Like I've always been on that thing where I think Kyler Murray is grossly overrated. And it's kind of showing right now. And now that he's not really being used as a runner, like that's where a lot of his fantasy value is coming from. He's kind of making his way into that mediocre wide receiver rankings, quarterback rankings. But that's another conversation for another time. But DeAndre Hopkins comes back and he opens up that offense completely. So I really think that when that happens, James Conner's touchdowns will go up. I think you can get them really cheap. Like, I think you could get them for a second. And if I was a contending roster and I had a spot on my roster, like a flex position or a running back 2 that was weak, or if I had Javonte Williams, or like maybe I had like I'm not sure who else I would say, but if I just had like a flex position that was weak, or I just lost a player like Javonte, I would feel pretty comfortable paying a second round pick and plugging in James Conner with the volume that he's getting. So, do you agree? Would you pay a second for James Conner?
Oh, I certainly would. I have a league where I'm contending, and the owner just lost Javonte Williams, and they offered me a second for James Conner, and I had to tell them no. Because I would pay that, but I'm not going to lose him for that. I'm still contending. If I wasn't contending, I very well may have done that. So yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head on the right value. So yeah, I agree 100% with you. I don't really have anything at all that I disagree with. So yeah, no, I agree 100% with what you're saying.
Okay, go ahead and jump into your next one.
Yeah, so I think you told me before the stream you didn't agree with my selection here. So I'm kind of curious here exactly what your points of argument are. But my guy here is Jamal Williams. So far through this year, he's actually running back 6 overall. Even when Swift played in the first 3 games, he was still running back 8. I think Swift was like 4 or 5 and still 4 or 5.
Swift got hurt in week 3, which gave Javonte way more. That's how he got those 2 touchdowns. Swift was
yeah, but in week one, Jamal Williams had 2 touchdowns as well. So he's been involved. And I just think that this is it's a timeshare, and it's a very powerful offense. I never thought I'd say that about the Detroit Lions in my lifetime, but it's a very high-powered offense. Part of the problem is they don't have any defense at all. So
no, the ranked 1 and 2.
They're just going to
32.
They're going to keep trying to score whenever they can. So yeah, I think there's enough volume here. They want to run the ball. They want to be balanced on offense. Jamal Williams is getting goal line work. It's, it sucks if you own Swift and, you see Jamal Williams, I don't even know if I should use the word, vulture touchdowns, but he's getting touchdowns. He's going to continue to get touchdowns, and his price is relatively crazy inexpensive. Much less than Connor, much less now than Melvin Gordon, much less than Alvin Kamara, all these other guys we're talking about. If you want to go through the list of other guys you could get, like David Montgomery, Josh Jacobs, Leonard Fournette, virtually any other starting running back is way overvalued compared to Jamal Williams. So I think you can get running back 2 type production by the end of the year, and very, very cheap. So if you have a couple of running backs and you're looking for like a bye week fill-in, I think Jamal Williams fits the bill. I think even if you need a running back too, yeah, he's obviously a great plug and play option this week. Once Swift is back and healthy, I still think he's going to be involved enough for you to get enough points from him as an RB2. So I just think at his current price, what, you think he's worth a third? I mean, for running back depth, if every team needs running back depth, every contending team, you can never have enough running backs. So I just think that he's one of those guys where if you're not contending, you shouldn't have him on your roster. And if you are contending, it's always good to have the depth. And he's one of the best pieces that you can have that is going to get production every week. Bryce, go ahead.
So, yeah, I'd pay a third for him. Like, you kind of somewhat it's not necessarily you convinced me, but I started to really listen to you, and I'm like, okay, yeah, he would not be expensive, because if I had Jamal Williams and I wasn't competing, I would try and get a second for him, right? Like, after what he's been doing, I would try to get a second. It would be harder to get rid of him for a third, but I probably would end up doing it because, what would he be his value, moving forward? It probably doesn't move from there. So, sure, I like it. I like him for a third. The problem for me is if I'm thinking about guys, if you're using him for the sole purpose of what you kind of mentioned there, and you just need a guy that fills in for your bye weeks, sure, I like Jamal Williams. But when I'm looking for guys, I want guys that are gonna be in my roster more often. So I just don't think if you're a contending roster, Jamal Williams probably isn't going to go in your lineup once Swift is healthy, I would imagine, unless you have Swift.
No, I think he easily could flex. I mean,
I
personally think so.
If you had a contending roster, I would imagine you'd have better flex options than Jamal Williams with Swift healthy.
Not once we get bye weeks, once we start getting some more injuries.
Sure. So we only really have 2 weeks of Swift and Jamal Williams, right? We only have 2 weeks of both of them healthy, right? And he put up 16. That's good for week 1. And then he put up 7. I expect to have more weeks closer to 7 than 16 when both are on the field. I realistically think that his floor is around that 6, 7, 8 mark. So as a flex position as a contender, that's really not a great option. That's the only argument I have. Sure, bye week fill in, and Swift hasn't stayed healthy so far in his young career. You might get plenty of more weeks for him. So if someone will sell him to you for a third round pick, I'd smash that accept button. I agree with you 100% on that. I think his value is worth buying for that. If they're asking for a second, that's when I'd probably be like, I think I'll just hold with what I got. I'd rather go get a guy like Khalil Herbert for a second because I think he has the opportunity.
Yeah, but I don't think you can get Herbert for a second.
Yeah. You would do Khalil Herbert for a second?
No, I don't think you could get Khalil Herbert for a second. But
yeah, I mean, you'd have to almost wait till Montgomery came back, I would imagine, before you could. But you never know. I mean, some people aren't big on him. I got Khalil Herbert as a throw-in on a trade this past draft. I had a 4th round pick, and I gave this dude my 4th round pick and Tylan Wallace for Khalil Herbert and some other guy. So yeah, some people were just unaware of him, and some people still might be because he did the same thing last year. David Montgomery was out. He played really well when he was in. When Montgomery came back, obviously his production went down because Montgomery's the starting back when he's healthy.
Sure.
So, all right. So I agree and disagree with you there. I guess mostly agree. Let's say it that way. All right, wide receivers. Go ahead and start with your first wide receiver.
Yeah, for me, it's Amari Cooper, 28 years old. He's been inconsistent really his whole career. So I don't know why people are surprised he's inconsistent this year. But, the offense for the Browns actually isn't that bad. I think they're going to try to make sure he gets involved more often every week. And Deshaun Watson is going to be back for playoff time. I mean, that's a lot of things. If you're contending, if you're 3-0 or 3-1, 4-0, and you're pretty confident you're going to at least make the playoffs. I mean, Amari Cooper is a great get right now before Deshaun Watson's back, because you have to imagine he's going to just light it up in the fantasy playoffs with Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson's coming back week 11. Most fantasy playoffs start week 14. That means they're going to have 3 weeks to kind of figure it out before the playoffs start in fantasy leagues. So I just think Amari Cooper, he's already shown a lot of upside. He's just coming off a bad game this past week. So it's a good opportunity now to buy him now. And if the team's not contending, like they really don't really have much usefulness keeping a 28-year-old guy on their roster anyway. Maybe he'll play a little bit longer, maybe into his 30s, but a lot of times with wide receivers, they start falling off relatively quickly. So I think a lot of owners who have Cooper are kind of hot and cold on him. Some of them really like him, other ones don't. So I think if you find that right team that doesn't need him, or you can, I think Amari Cooper for a late first, I think is an easy pull for me, especially considering he's going to have Deshaun Watson in the playoffs for you. I'm all for that. So I just think that I think Amari Cooper is a good grab if you need a wide receiver help. And I think, we're talking about, Chase and Waddle and all the, Tyreek Hill. You can't pay a late first for any of these guys, but you can get that production at the end of this season with Deshaun Watson in town for the Cleveland Browns with Amari Cooper. So I'm all in on Amari Cooper. If you need wide receiver help, I think he is relatively affordable and a good pool. Bryce?
Yeah, I agree. I really don't have a ton more to add. And I would easily pay a late first as a contender because he is just 28, and I think he turned 28 recently. So you could still have another couple of years of production out of him for sure. So if your roster's contending this year and definitely still has the opportunity to contend next year, I think he just helps you for 2 years. And throwing a late first for that, that's a no-brainer for me as well.
And I think most teams, if they're not contending and you can just give them a first for Amari Cooper, I think most teams will do that.
They very well might. Yeah. I think that's kind of one of those. I think that value for him is pretty accurate. DeAndre Hopkins. That's who I've got for mine. If you're contending, you're probably already doing well. So I would trade for him now because I would imagine that his value immediately goes up as soon as his suspension is lifted and he starts playing. I would pay a first for him pretty quickly. Because I think when he comes back strong and he comes back fast. He's not coming off injury. He's practicing. So I wouldn't worry about any of that. I don't think it's going to be like, let's weed him in there. I think it's going to be DeAndre Hopkins back. Let's feed him. He makes an immediate impact. He becomes a top guy for your fantasy leagues immediately. So I think that you could afford to pay that first and sit him on your bench because you're probably already doing pretty well. So. Yeah, what are your thoughts on DeAndre Hopkins? Would you pay a first for him?
I don't know. For you? It's pretty close. He is. Yeah, he's over 30. I don't know. That's close. But between the two, I'd much rather have Amari Cooper. I don't know if you agree with that, Amari Cooper or DeAndre Hopkins. I'd rather have Amari Cooper.
I think D-Hop gives you a better chance to win this season. Where I think Amari Cooper gives you – it's kind of weird how it sounds, but I think he gives you a better chance to win this and next season, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I feel you. I know what you mean.
You know what I mean? Like, I think D-Hop, once he comes back, puts up more numbers than Cooper week 7 and on.
I
think Cooper surpasses him next year in production.
I don't like bringing on guys that if they have one bad injury, their value is gone. And I think with Hopkins, that is the case. If Hopkins comes and plays at the end of this year and tears his ACL, for example, knock on wood, let's hope that doesn't happen. But I think his value is essentially nothing. Kind of like Odell Beckham. It's basically nothing. Compared that to Amari Cooper. If Amari Cooper teared his ACL at 28, he'd be playing again ball when he's 29. You'd still have him back when he's 30 again. So that's where I kind of lose it is once guys get to that age where, hey, if they tear their ACL, is their value toast? It is. I'm way less willing to give a first for that type of player.
That's fair. I just again, I don't trade.
I'm such a pessimistic person, I
don't trade, especially contending. I don't trade on that logic. sure, I agree with everything you just said, but
Yeah.
I guess I'll just take the odds that doesn't happen because
Yeah, I
he's been
feel you.
relatively healthy his whole career. So, all right, go ahead and get your second guy in there.
Ooh, Brandon Cooks, 29 years old. I think he just turned 29, so he's 28-ish, 29, just turned 29. Again, just like Amari Cooper, I think a late first is fair value. I think a team not contending would be willing to part with him for the same price. And really for similar reasons. I think he has shown just this past week, he's been involved. He's consistent. It's like he always puts up at least 10 points, but he always can, blow up and give you 25, 30 points from time to time as well. He's really the only receiving option on the Houston Texans. Mills obviously isn't quite as good as Deshaun Watson or someone else you're going to be looking at in the fantasy playoffs who will be tossing him the rock. But at the same time, I still think Brandon Cooks is young enough where you can get a couple more years of elite value, and he's cheap enough where you don't have to pay an arm and a leg to get him on your team. So for very similar reasons, I like Brandon Cooks just as I like Amari Cooper. And I think both guys are great contending acquisitions that can bolster your team to get what we all play for, the trophy.
I agree. I mean, I've always liked Brandon Cooks. He's been relatively consistent pretty much his entire career, and he has ceiling play, right? So doesn't really look like he's lost his step. Sure, he has a bad week here and there based on some bad matchups, but the dude just produces, and I think you can get him much cheaper than any of the other guys that we've mentioned so far, and even my last guy. Like, I would imagine that you could probably get like Brandon Cooks in a second for like a first.
Yeah, you can if you trade away your first, like you can get Brandon Cooks plus something else.
Yeah, like a second rounder. I would try.
Sure.
I mean, why not? So, yeah, I'd probably try and you feel out some trades like that if Brandon Cooks could be a guy that immediately contributes to my roster. So that's a good one. My last one is Keenan Allen. Now, if you've ever listened to me talk on here, I'm not a huge Keenan Allen fan, but when he's on the field, he produces. But it's gotten to the point in his career where injuries have become a concern, so I would be cautious of paying too much for him. Like, I really think that I would pay the same price for Keenan Allen that I would for Brandon Cooks. So I like Brandon Cooks better, if that makes sense for a guy. Because as a contender, Keenan Allen's injury history at this point is becoming a concern for me. But the fact of the matter is when he's on the field, he produces at a high level. So would I be willing to give up a first for him? I couldn't blame you if you wanted to, but I would try and do a first for Keenan Allen in a second. Maybe Keenan Allen in a third. It might be hard to get it for that. But again, this is an older receiver where I think his value is just continuing to regress. Like, I think last year he would have cost more than he does now, especially with the recent injury history. He's got Justin Herbert thrown into him. That's a very high-powered offense, so he's still putting up very high-caliber numbers when he's on the field. It's just hopefully he can stay on the field, especially later in the season if you are a contender. So what are your thoughts on Keenan Allen?
Yeah, I think if the price is right, obviously it has to be a PPR league. I'm for it. I'm for it. What I like about Keenan Allen is he's on a really good offense, and he has a very safe floor. So he's never going to kill you. He's never going to put up a zero. It's like he's good for at least 10 points. And when he scores, he's already in the 20s. Like, he's just one of those guys that, he's probably not going to go with any 30-point games, but he's probably going to average, 15 points every time you put him in your lineup. And that's great. So I agree with you. If you can get Keenan Allen for the right price, I think that's a good grab. I agree.
Good. All right. Go ahead and jump into your tight end, because I think this one's kind of a no-brainer for most people watching for a veteran tight end that you'd want to buy if you were a contender.
Zach Ertz, 31 years old. Like Keenan Allen, very consistent. He's not going to have huge, Kelsey or Mark Andrews type weeks. on the high end, but he's also not going to usually ever put up, just a couple points. I mean, he's good for like 10 points. And at tight end, if you can get consistency at tight end, who would you rather start like in a redraft league? Would you rather start Zach Ertz or Kyle Pitts right now? Probably Zach Ertz, right? Like, and you can get Zach Ertz for dirt cheap. I mean, if a team is not contending and they have Zach Ertz just like on their roster, it's like, dude, what are you doing? Like, you got to trade this guy now. Like, you can't just leave him on your roster. It doesn't make any sense. So I think he's a very easy get. And especially in a tight end premium league with his PPR value, catching balls from Kyler Murray, I think he's a great grab. I guess it depends on the format, but I think a second is fair for Ertz. If you're contending and need that tight end, I mean, it's so hard to get a consistent tight end right now. I think everyone's feeling that. I'm not too worried about Hopkins coming in and taking away targets because, I mean, Rondale Moore isn't really proven to be much.
I think Hopkins comes in and takes away from Marquise
Hopkins
Brown.
will take a little bit maybe, but I think Hopkins
Brown more than anybody.
That's what exactly. It's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah. So we're on the same page there.
Yeah, I mean I agree. Zach Ertz a no-brainer. Like if somebody were to offer, if I wasn't contending and someone offered me a second round pick for Zach Ertz, I would immediately be like, all right, here, you can have him. Right, because I'm going to have no use for him. I would imagine the Trey McBride takeover is going to at least start next year. So, and those in the chat asking questions, stay tuned. We will answer some of these questions. Just if you guys weren't here at the beginning, right after I talk about my tight end, I guess. So I put Tyler Higby down. So Tyler Higby is older than I thought he was. He's 29 years old. I've never been a Tyler Higby guy, but he's producing this year. Like he's getting all the volume. And I think it definitely helps that there's really been nobody stepping up outside of Cooper Kupp for the Rams offense. So it's like Tyler Higby is getting all these targets and the production is following. So again, I think he's like tight end 3 right now in fantasy, maybe tight end. I think he's a top 5 tight end in fantasy this year. Yeah. And the way it's looking, he might continue to get this amount of volume. So he's Stafford's next option that he's targeting outside of Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp's always going to get his. Like as long as he's there with Matt Stafford, he's going to be the most productive receiver in fantasy. The highest floor, highest ceiling. It seems like. But next man up is Tyler Higby, and if you got a fantasy roster and your tight end's the second best option for an offense, that's very good. And I think you could get him relatively cheap as well. I think a second round pick for him is, again, something that owners that aren't contending would easily take. And I think you would feel very comfortable paying that if you didn't have a solid tight end option, which a lot of people don't. So do you agree with Tyler Higby?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Who do you think is cheaper, Higby or Ertz right now? I don't know. I would,
if I had both, I would be thinking that Higby would be cheaper just because, like, again, I don't really think next year their values, they're going to be like, I think both could easily drop out of the top 10 next year.
Yeah.
So I want the guy I feel is going to be more consistent throughout the year, which is Zach Ertz.
Yeah. I mean, of the two, I would probably prefer the cheaper option in Higby. I mean, I think that's a great shout. But yeah, I mean, I agree 100%. I think Higby is great. He's on one of my contending teams, and I'm more than happy with what I'm getting. I did not expect anything close to what I was getting. I mean, compared to last year, this is like night and day. So yeah, I think Higby is dialed in. I think Stafford trusts him, and let's go. Let's ride.
Real quick before we get to the questions, I have a contending roster and I traded for a tight end. I traded a third round pick next year and a second round pick in 2024 for David Njoku.
I think it's okay. I don't know if you needed to give the third.
I tried not to.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's fine. I mean, Njoku, again, he's like Amari Cooper. I mean,
I think it's a similar situation to where there's no one stepping up as the number 2 option.
Yeah, no, I'm good with it. I'm good with it. I don't know if you needed to give that extra third though. On top of
I tried. I know.
I know.
Myself, and then I offered a second and a fifth, a fifth round next year, and then a second.
So we're on the same page. I think it's a good move.
Yeah,
I think if you have the hole, too many people play for next year, but sometimes you gotta put the chips in. You gotta go all in.
I basically have no picks next year, but it's all right. My roster is pretty good and it's deep. So we have some questions. Oh, those listening to us in the form of a podcast later. That's it for the show.
It's over.
We'll be answering questions for the rest of the day that you guys won't be able to see on the live stream. So thank you guys so much for listening, and we will see you back next Tuesday.
Yes, we will.
All right. So Patty Mills asked, how much free agent budget are you dropping on Caleb Huntley? And good. Luckily, our friend Brad.
Free agent acquisition budget.
Our fab on Caleb Huntley. And luckily, Brad was in here. And I think we were on the same page with Brad because we did talk about this because Patty asked this before the stream even started. And I think you agreed that Tyler Algier is like more of the guy we'd be looking for. I wouldn't be really dropping anything but maybe a couple of bucks on Caleb Huntley.
I agree. 100% agree. I mean, I'm going to. If my league mates are watching this, I'm going to bid a lot for Caleb Huntley. You better raise your bids up if you want to compete with me.
Right.
I agree with what you said.
Mm-hmm.
Sarcasm, guys. Come on. No?
Let's see here. Oh, Brad agreed with me on OBJ. I think the route running you can lose a step when your route running is as crisp as his.
I think you guys are undervaluing NFL level competition. I think if you lose a step, I don't care how good you run routes. If you've lost a step after an ACL injury, I don't care how good of routes you run.
Slow, and that dude could run routes the best in the league for pretty much his whole career. Like you could be slow, and as you're the great route runner, you're gonna be productive. Like in OBJ's hands, his hands don't go away from a knee injury. Like he can make this contested catch. It's not like he focused on like if Tyreek Hill tore his ACL and lost a step, I'd be more concerned than a player like OBJ tearing it.
I understand. All I'm saying is for people watching, thinking, oh, I need to go trade for OBJ now. I'm just saying, be careful.
I'd send a third for him. For sure, send a third for him.
A third is fine. Just be a little careful.
If I was selling
free agent. He's a free agent. We don't know exactly what's going to happen yet. Just pump the brakes a little bit.
Griffin asked, Cook, Madison, and Debo. So pretty much the Vikings wide running back and Debo for Leonard Fournette, Olave.
All right, Cook, Madison, and Debo. So Cook and Debo for Fournette, Olave, and Keenan Allen. And I guess this is redraft.
It could be. I mean, would it really? If it's redraft, I'm going to take. So if this was redraft, I would look at it like, does Olave make it into my starting lineup? And if yes, I probably accept it because I really don't think. I think Leonard Fournette is going to do better than Cook this year. And I mean, I like Debo better than Keenan Allen, but it's not like they're like miles apart or anything for redraft.
Oh, I think they're pretty far apart.
And redraft, I don't think they're that far.
Especially with Keenan Allen already hampered by a hamstring injury. I mean,
but again, if all three of those guys get put in my lineup for just missing two, it would be worth it. Like I don't think it's an unfair.
But this trade doesn't really make him any better. I mean, does it really make him better? I mean, he has Cook and Debo. So does Lenny, Olave, and Keenan Allen really make him that much better? I mean, you look at his roster.
Cook and Lenny have the same value for me, both in redraft and actually, Leonard Fournette has more redraft value. In Dynasty, they're pretty much the same for me.
Okay.
Then it becomes like, okay, Debo for Olave and Keenan Allen,
But he has Madison, which is nice. I mean, if Cook got hurt, he already has Madison.
Right.
It's like, what if Lenny got hurt?
In that way, but.
If he does this trade and Leonard Fournette gets hurt, right?
Yeah,
he'd be in deep trouble, especially considering Keenan Allen's already hurt.
Well, he's got Brian Robinson coming back from
his got shot. Come on, I mean, we don't know and that's another thing I was telling someone else today. Look, we don't know what Brian Robinson is just because he's a rookie, let alone coming back from 2 gunshot wounds. So just pump the brakes on Brian Robinson too. I know it's like a feel-good Disney, type movie type story, but Just be careful with Brian Robinson. Don't.
If I was a contending roster, I think I would lean the Lenny, Olave, Keenan Allen side because I think all three of those guys could help you this year. But it helps because I'm just huge on Olave. I'm big on Olave. Like I like Debo a lot too, but it's like I just think Leonard will help you win this year better than Cook will. And then you're getting Keenan Allen, which is obviously a downgrade from Debo, but then you have Olave for the for the future as well for when Keenan Allen does. I think the trade's even. Realistically, like I think it's a very good.
I think it's even. I'm going to go with the more conservative approach and keep Cook, thinking he turns it around. You already got Madison. Debo, I think is miles ahead of anyone else. Well, maybe not Leonard. Maybe they're pretty even. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm gonna. We might have to disagree. We don't generally disagree, Bryce, on these.
It's close. Like it's not.
We don't and we don't generally disagree. So this is kind of cool. We're a little bit on different sides on this one.
And this is like get your guy, right? Because you like Debo more. I like Olave a lot. So it's like if you like one of them more than the other, pick the side. I think this is one where you could pick the side where you like the other guy.
I will say, if Trey Lance was still the quarterback for the Niners, I would definitely pick the Leonard Fournette side. But with Jimmy Garoppolo, I'm really big on Debo this year.
Okay. Lamar, CMC, Leonard Fournette, Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, Kelsey, Godwin, Judy, Jacoby Meyer.
Is this his team? Jesus,
this is
Christ! Is this a championship-winning team? Yes.
I'm a little concerned about your running back depth. I'll be honest. I would be looking at you got Jamar Chase, CeeDee, Godwin, and Judy. I would almost be looking to improve at running back by getting rid of maybe a Godwin or a Judy or a Jacoby Meyer and get some running back depth if you're only rocking with CMC and Leonard Fournette.
Yeah, I'm assuming he has some other guys. He just didn't list them all because he has so many studs. It's like, holy cow, what a roster, man. Great job doing that draft and trades and whatnot. I don't know if this is Dynasty or not, but either way, I mean, this is a killer roster. Killer roster.
Yeah, this is good for redraft or Dynasty.
And really I know it's 10-man, not 12, but even still, I mean, that's just a killer roster.
Yeah. I'm in a 10-man league, and it's hard to get a roster that stacked.
Yeah, I would consider if this was my team, and let's say those are his best running backs, and he doesn't really have anyone else beyond that. I would very much consider trading Christian McCaffrey for like 2 or 3 running back pieces.
He's 4 now. I would keep McCaffrey to try and win the ship, personally.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just really, if those are his only running backs,
I'd be looking to take a wide receiver away. You Chase, CeeDee, Godwin, and Judy. I feel okay getting rid of. I mean, if you're starting all 4 of them, okay, it'd be a little bit harder to sell one. But if you can only start 3. Like, I'd be okay getting rid of Godwin or Judy, and then
I would trade. You know what I would do is trade Dobbs while he has all this momentum. I think you can get a pretty nice running back for Dobbs. Yeah,
go try and get Cam Akers. Dude hasn't produced yet, but is now starting. Like, once the team gets rolling, I think he's going to be one of the main beneficiaries of it.
Do you think you could trade Dobbs for Melvin Gordon in a redraft league straight up right now, or no?
No, I think I think the person would require more.
Yeah,
in a redraft, yeah, for sure. Okay. I would try it, but it can't hurt to try.
Yeah.
Mike Boone or Latavius Murray, I would go Mike Boone.
I agree.
He looked pretty decent in his.
So those drops at the end, did you see that? Like,
yeah,
man, what a bummer. Like he arguably lost them the game.
Oh, there's another question. I like this one. Last one. Would you add a second to Pierce to get Amari Cooper? Yes, and I would accept it on the other end. I think that is a great trade for somebody that wants to start a rebuild, and that's a great trade for someone contending. Like I like Alec Pierce a lot. I think he's going to get noticed soon. So I think this would be the time to get him.
I agree with you 100%. I think this is a very fair trade, and if I'm contending, I think that's a very fair price for Cooper. I agree.
Yeah. I'm not a big Amari Cooper fan because of the you mentioned it, the inconsistencies he's had throughout his career, and I hate that from wide receiver position. Like he's going to win you weeks, sure, but he'll also lose you weeks. And he just had one where he probably lost. He lost me a week. I lost by 10 points, and he put up like 2. So
yeah, Yeah,
Um,
yeah, it'll happen.
yeah,
He's part of it's a Amari Cooper roller coaster every year.
yeah. So, but I expect him to eat this year, and I expect him to have a pretty good season next year.
And I think he'll be more consistent with Deshaun Watson. So we'll have to see how it plays out. But I really do. I think he's going to be more consistent toward the end of the year when it really matters.
Yeah, I think Amari Cooper and David Njoku will both be very beneficial of when Deshaun Watson gets under. I think their touchdown upside goes through the roof. Their targets will be better. Like, I think that whole team as a whole, like, I think it hurts Nick Chubb the most in the sense of his volume, but now his touchdown upside goes up. So it's like, I think that kind of counteracts it a little bit. But, yeah, I like that trade. You maybe even try and get a third in there too. I think a second, third, and Alec Pierce for Amari Cooper. Why not? Why not take a stab at a third as well? So, yeah, and I would probably accept that as the person trying to acquire Amari Cooper. So,
yep, great. I know Patty's in our Discord, so that's a great shout there too. If you guys have any additional questions, head over onto the Discord and you can ask all questions like this. And I'm in there. Bryce is in there. We're happy to answer those.
Yep, sounds good. And that's it for the questions today. Perfect timing with 4 minutes to spare. So we're trying to find things to talk about every week. I'm sure we'll figure out something next week. So we will see you guys next Tuesday. What time is it for you, Leone?
It's 5:00 for me. The sun's still out where I'm at.
What is it? What's your time zone called? The Pacific? The
Pacific. You got it.
Pacific
time.
Pacific, or what do the people call it?
Go ahead.
Remember, but I used
try again. I want to hear you try.
I can say Pacific, but I used to not be able to say it very well. And 8:00 Eastern. So we'll see you guys next week. Thank you, Patty. See ya.
Good night.
Night.